welcome to Kharkiv.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very good to be here.
You have visited 40 SQL Saturdays so far. What motivates you to do what you are doing?
So there are two answers for this. One is the funny answer, which is they have foods, of course. But the correct answer would be that I do enjoy delivering sessions, going around the world, delivering sessions, having people show up in my sessions, hopefully transmitting a bit of knowledge to everyone who's attending the sessions. And in the overall end, just have a bit of fun, interact with people, get to know, do some networking, get to know what people do in their daily lives, which might be different. A lot of people within my sessions usually ask me sometimes complicated things, so that's very good to get new scenarios and to give me more ideas to do and not only other sessions but also do other work as well.
Apart from sharing your knowledge and experience, what kind of projects are you working on now?
So I can't tell you about all of the things that I'm doing. So I do typically both consulting and training. Consulting, currently I'm not working for any public company, so for those I usually am able to tell what I do. I do work for private companies to do things like putting out fires. So if they have a problem, they usually call me. Those I really can't discuss because hopefully if nothing bad happens, then I did my job correctly. And if something bad happens, then it's my fault.
What difficulties are you facing with your work in 2019?
Well, honestly, that's a tricky question. I'm not sure how to answer that. All work is different. 20 years ago, when I started working, the kind of work we did was different. You had things like simple applications on a database. You had to devise some program to actually handle that and to put information into the database. The world has changed over the years, so after a while people began to understand that they needed to query the information out, not just to put the information into the database, but also to query it, move on to a different level, such as doing BI, to get insights and to help with management decisions, to get information from BI. And then the world again changed lately when things began to receive too much information, like things like NoSQL, that receive information from things like IoT, Internet of Things. So the world has changed a bit, and in the last few years I think that the machine learning is the thing that everyone is talking about now, and it changes the way we do things, because the way you get information, it's not just the basic BI thing that you do now for decisions. You also want to get information from machine learning, and you also want the machines to actually give you predictions that you can handle them automatically in your applications. So the world has changed a bit over the last 20 years. It's completely different now, but because this change is actually quite gradual, as long as you keep up with the changes gradually, you'll be okay. But if you are still doing the same thing as you are doing 20 years ago, and suddenly you have to go to a very different level, you're going to have a lot of headaches. But if you do it gradually, you'll be fine.
What do you think about cloud solutions instead of local databases? Would one change the others, and how soon?
So the first misconception people usually get about the clouds is that if things go to the cloud, they lose their jobs, and they stop being the ones that know about the infrastructure, and suddenly someone else outsourced it to the clouds and they're not doing anything themselves, so they stop doing the work and then they get fired. This is actually quite wrong, and statistics actually prove that once you move to the cloud, you save a lot of money on infrastructure and in a whole bunch of things, but specifically the actual work that you need continues to be the same, or in some cases is actually bigger than the work you had on premise. So that doesn't mean for the people who do clouds, that doesn't mean they're going to lose their jobs. Quite the contrary, they just need to shift their paradigm to actually understand that things are in the cloud now. They're not local, they're in the clouds. But if you can understand that, and if you can work with that, nothing bad will actually happen to you and your jobs. In terms of your company, however, because you are moving to the cloud, you might save a lot of money. And I'll give you an example of this. So if you have an on-premise server, you need to buy the server, that costs a few €1,000. You have some characteristics, and that's okay. But if after 2 or 3 years you need more, you can either do one or two things. You can either buy a new server and then migrate everything, which is a problem, or you can just get more hard disks and more capacity like memory into that solution. And that also costs money. And you didn't predict that in the beginning, but you are paying for it for 3 years, and then suddenly you need more. So for a while, you have more capacity than you need to account for 3 years, and then you don't have enough capacity. If you go to the cloud, it's very gradual. So you get more and more and more as you need it. So you're only paying for the things that you actually need. And in the cloud, there are some situations such as, first of all, you only pay for the infrastructure you need. Secondly, you only pay for the licensing you need. And in some situations, you are paying licensing by CPU, and in some kinds of software, not necessarily Microsoft, but other kinds of software, you also pay by memory, the amount of memory that you want to consume. And in some cases, also the amount of data that you have on disk that you also want to consume for those solutions. So the actual licensing that you pay, if you pay them in the cloud, you actually pay much less. And in one scenario is if you have one server that's only used for ETL at nights, you actually have to pay for it 24 hours a day on premises. But if it is in the cloud, you just pay for 1 hour or 2, you turn it off, and in that case you save something like 12 times the value. So it's a lot. Plus licensing in the cloud makes it much easier. If you want to migrate, for instance, for SQL standards to SQL Enterprise or something equivalent, you could do that in the cloud. This is not a very good example with Azure because this is not how it works, but anyway, if you have something that's a simple format and you want more, you can migrate very easily. The actual example of this is not actually SQL Server, but you are actually talking about things like SQL database. Mm-hmm. So if you want a SQL database that's actually quite small, you can use that one, but if you want the premium versions or bigger versions, you can actually migrate in just a click of a button. So that makes it much easier. In many cases, you don't even need to have downtime because you're just increasing the number of nodes that solution actually has. It's completely transparent to you, but simply works. If you want to just scale it up, well, in that case, you cost money. There's also 2 other factors that people don't consider when they're migrating to the cloud, which are related to costs. So one of these things is things like the electricity that you pay. So we talked about licensing, but electricity is also a major part. When you work in IT, in an IT department, you usually only have to worry about buying the infrastructure. The payment of electricity is usually a different department. The department just assumes, yes, I have to pay for this, who cares? But if you consider the cost of electricity, plus the cost of licensing, plus the cost of things like air conditioning and the electricity for air conditioning and maintenance and UPSs and all of these things that you need when you have infrastructure on premises, you figured out that moving everything to the cloud is actually much cheaper. So just add it all together, it suddenly makes sense. Plus, this is, while on premises you are actually getting things as investments, money for as an investment. When you have stuff in the cloud, you are actually paying it gradually, so it's an operational cost, not an investment cost. So that makes it much easier instead of wasting the money all now. If you grow more clients, you pay more. If you grow less clients, you pay less. So it makes sense, it's proportional.
Absolutely, but what do you think, how many companies, how many managers have already understood that proportion and decided to switch from? You don't
Honestly,
have the data, do you?
I don't have the statistics to tell you this. All I know is all major companies, like Fortune 500 companies, are using things like Azure. So everyone is migrating to, whether it is Azure or some other cloud like AWS or Google Cloud, they're all migrating to a solution like this. Some of them, like some of the Fortune 500 countries, do not trust a single cloud, and I completely understand that they don't trust a single one. So they have things in Azure, AWS, Google, all at the same time, because they want some redundancy into their infrastructure. So some parts are in one thing, some parts are in the other, some actually overlap for redundancy, so they are doing it right. If I was doing that, I would probably do that myself as well for redundancy, because if you run things like, let's say, something like an eBay or something like that. If you just stay 1 minute without connection, you lose millions and millions of euros, right? So it is a good idea to guarantee that your infrastructure never fails.
And what would be your advice to all professionals working in the field, considering the fact of fast changing database environment?
Okay. So, of course, that's over the years things change, and I mentioned that you need to learn a bit more things, different things every year. It is important to keep up with everything. So, I know people who are great experts in one specific field, but if that field goes irrelevant after a few years because the technology doesn't exist anymore, no one uses it anymore, those people are out of a job. So personally, I've always learned a bit about every single technology so that I know just a tiny bit. It's good when you are designing things like architectures of systems. It's good to know a bit about everything. You don't have to know everything about a specific technology. If you know a bit about everything, it's very good. And then when you have a specific project that needs this technology, then you focus on that technology and you learn that technology. You don't need, when you start a project, you don't need to know all about the technology, but you need to have the will to actually learn about it. That's a major part. So a lot of situations I had when people called me over to fix a specific problem, and they said, please, we're desperate, please help me, and this is not working and we're losing money. So I go there, and sometimes the technology, I have no idea what it is. It's a technology I never learned before. So what I do is, okay, give me 1 day and I'll try to learn about this technology and try to fix your problem. So you don't have to know everything, but you have to understand that you need to learn if you really need the technologies. And if you are considering things like machine learning now, nowadays people have been focusing a lot on R, focusing on Python. In the future, you should probably, if you are already knowledgeable about things like C# or Visual Basic, you can focus on ML.NET, which also has libraries for machine learning like R and Python. But if you're not familiar with these two technologies like R and Python, these two languages, you can maybe focus on ML.NET. It's something that you can start with and then move on to R and Python, because then you understand the concepts, but you change the language. So it makes your transition much easier. Most people that started learning things like machine learning, they started in R and suddenly it was a blur for them. They didn't know the language and they didn't know how machine learning worked. So for them it was a very steep curve to actually learn this. But if you learn it gradually with a language like ML.NET that uses .NET languages, then it makes it much easier for you. But then again, apart from that, which is very specific to machine learning, I really don't have any specific advice for people to actually learn specific things, but have a look at the things people are using. Be curious, this is very important. Be very curious about all of the things that people are doing. Go to SQL Saturdays like this. Understand that people are using different things like big data and even things like IoT, which are very interesting as well. Even if this is not the focus of the things you do, learn a bit about these things, because you never know that in a year's time you might have a project that focuses on these technologies.
Absolutely. Now, one more question.
Go ahead.
What you as a speaker, your career, how long have you been participating in SQL Saturdays, and not only in SQL Saturdays, but in events as a speaker?
Okay, so I have been doing a bit of events only in the past 4 or 5 years. I enjoy doing them, so I keep coming back. How do I say this? Of course, I mentioned before, the most important part is that they feed you, of course. It is a good idea to go around and actually learn things, but I think that the thing that I get back from SQL Saturdays the more is that I get to interact with a lot of people and learn new things. So of course, I go to events, I go to sessions by other speakers, they are amazing. I usually say that I'm not an expert in specific things. When you usually have a badge, you have a badge that says speaker. And for me, it's only speaker, not expert. And other people who are speakers and experts actually have taught me over the years, have taught me a lot of things that for me have helped me over the years as well. I should also mention some things like I started doing public speaking, and when I was doing that, I was doing different things back home in Portugal. So I was doing things like consulting and a bit of training as well, but mostly consulting. And because I started doing public speaking as well and doing all of these events, I actually changed my life a bit. So my recommendation is you never know what's going to happen in the future. You might get a different job. A lot of people that I know that started doing public speaking in SQL Saturdays, even if it's just in your country, you don't really need to go to a different country. Even if it's just in your country, a lot of people I know have changed their jobs, got a different job in a different country, they have gotten more money and things like that. It is a good idea for you to participate, not only as participants, but submit sessions. We need more sessions from other people. Even if you think you have nothing to share, you probably sometimes do things like I had a problem in this situation, this is how I solved it. Maybe if you can share that information, do a session based on that and share the information how you solved this problem, that might help someone else. And if you become a speaker, if you become a better known in the community, maybe more people like Devart and other companies might be interested in hiring you and actually work for them, and obviously get more money, hopefully, right? Hopefully, okay. I'm not going to ask about Devart and whatever you pay, I have no idea, but different story. But it's also very interesting to find out that all of the people that I know that started doing public speaking in SQL Saturdays and in user groups, they actually changed their life completely. What they did 5 years ago is completely different from what they are doing now, and for me it's the same thing. So obviously I enjoy myself more, I get to travel a lot. For me, a normal holiday is not to go to some country and go to the beach in some different country, paradise country. No, I live in Portugal, beach is already there. Difference is, whenever I have a holiday, I don't go anywhere. I just stay at home. I go to beaches in my country just locally.
Are you going to Web Summit in November in Lisbon?
No, I've been there a few years ago for the first year. It is interesting, you get to know a lot of people. The actual contents don't interest me that much because it's more about entrepreneurship. And once you've seen it once, you've seen it all the time. It doesn't change that much. I'm more interested in events about technology. But if you've never been there...
Fast-changing technologies.
Yes, I know. But honestly, Web Summit, it is good for someone who's never been there. I do recommend that you go there at least only once. But for me, it's not interesting. Plus, I usually get to do a lot of different work in different countries at that time of the year, so it's always difficult for me. But if I'm in Portugal, I'll probably go there. But it's not my priority because I do get to talk to a lot of people already all over the world. To actually focus on talking to them specifically just because they came to my country is not very interesting for me.
Andrea, you mentioned public speaking and the word expert. There are some experts who are not speakers. And what do you think? How to start? Maybe these experts, they don't understand all the opportunities that public speaking could give them. So, how to start?
So I've seen a lot of people that actually have great knowledge, but they are very shy to actually deliver sessions in public. I completely understand this. It's something that happens with a lot of people. For me, I didn't do public speaking in a few years ago. I started to do that a lot very recently, but I'm a very extrovert kind of person, so this comes naturally to me. About a few months ago in March, we actually had an event in Portugal. This event happened all over the world. This is called Global Diversity CFP Call for Presentations. This was a very interesting event. We had that event in Portugal, we organized it, and we got a lot of speakers, including speakers like Mihail Matev, that came directly from Bulgaria just to be there and give people who were there some insights about public speaking, about how to organize events. And we had an event with a good number of people that actually learned how to do public speaking. So they were able to learn from experts, and we had people there like João Dias, which is a guy in Portugal that does a lot of theater, like improv theater, and he's an astrophysicist, so he does a lot of different things, but he also does that for a passion, like being on stage and actually doing improv theater, like doing stuff with just a chair and actually improvising scenes and things like that. So if you learn stage presence, you will be perfectly okay with delivering a session. To actually deliver stage presence, there are a lot of courses that you can do, not related to technology, by the way, but there are courses you can do to actually understand how to do public speaking, how to be on stage, how not to be afraid of the audience, how to interact with the audience. And interacting with the audience is completely amazing, because if you start to learn it, you can actually use it in a session, in an actual technical session. And to do that actually improves the way people get to learn your contents. So if people are in your session just sleeping, that's not going to help. If they're in your session and you do some jokes, sometimes I know there are speakers that say, oh, this guy does jokes in a session, this is not acceptable, he's a terrible speaker. No, it's the other way around. If you keep people comfortable and happy to be there, they will learn more. They will not sleep, of course, they're always curious, and this is actually one of the important things that you need to learn about delivering a session is people need to be interested in your session, and doing that in a positive way is usually the best solution.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for the interview. It's really good to be here, and I should mention that I didn't do the math, so I don't know about the numbers, but a few years ago my top one country was the UK in terms of delivering sessions. Currently, I think it's Bulgaria, which is top one of delivering sessions and workshops. But right now, this is very much tied with Ukraine. So this week I delivered 3 workshops in Lviv and 1 session. Today I delivered 2 sessions, and I've been here in SQL Saturday in Kiev, and also Lviv last year, and Dnipro a few years ago. So by now I'm not really sure which one is on top, so Bulgaria or Ukraine, but anyway, it's not a competition. I'm just really happy to be here, and I can tell you that for the last week people were amazing to me. They were really hospitable, and I really love it here in the Ukraine. So thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for the interview, and hope to see you at sometime soon, maybe again in Kiev. Thank you very much, and thank you for the interview.
Thank you, Andrea.